tonight's meeting.
Yeah.
So to the board members, this is an impromptu meeting, not impromptu. It is a necessary meeting being scheduled because we were unable to conduct some essential business at our regularly scheduled board meeting. The thrust of tonight is to talk about the budget, but one of the other main thing that we had hoped to wrap up last week was the Pledge of Allegiance, like what we're going to do as a board. And that's not actually on the agenda. There is the Pledge of Allegiance, but that's just like the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. So given what I just heard from Director Gordon in terms of the amount of time she is going to need to talk about the budget, I would entertain a motion to add an agenda item, which is a discussion about the practice of the Pledge of Allegiance in the SVUESD, please. So moved. Thanks. I got one from Glenn. I have a second from Sandy. Any discussion about this, please? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of adding a Pledge of Allegiance discussion item and action item to the agenda as published, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
I was about to ask for any abstentions. Let me just say a little something about abstentions and no votes. It's been my practice, according to what I believe the current Robert's Rules of Order to be, which is to say abstentions and no votes, counting them as two different types of actions. What I learned though is that Robert's Rules has been updated relatively recently, and now an agenda, and now what used to be a no vote is actually the same as an abstention. And so I will no longer be asking for no votes, and I will no longer be saying that abstentions go to the majority. That's the old Robert's Rules. Current Robert's Rules are abstentions is an act of not voting. So not that would have changed any of the decisions this board has made, as far as I can tell going back, but it is a point of order that I wanted to make public. Sandy?
Just a clarifying question. So if you have a vote and you have 3 votes for and nothing against, does that mean that you haven't hit the number in a quorum?
No. You need a majority of votes cast to carry a motion.
Thank you.
Okay.
Got
So we have that motion on the floor. We went through the whole voting. So we had a bunch in the affirmative, none against. Any abstentions? Of course not. So the motion passes. So we will add that directly after public comments. So agenda item 1 is a recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. So I would invite folks, if they so wish, to rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, that brings us to the second agenda item of the evening, which is public comments. I think just about everyone here has been to the last 3 board meetings at this point. 3 board meetings. Thank you, Mary. So I would ask if anyone has anything new to offer. Again, with the understanding that really the thrust of tonight has to be about the budget because that's the deadline we're up against. If anyone has anything they would like to offer in terms of public comment, maybe that hasn't been said before, now would be the time to do this. And if you wouldn't mind, if you have something to say, rise and introduce yourself and tell us the town in which you live. Yes. No. Just waving and saying,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that's nice of you. Mr. Adams.
Know my name. I'm Clark Adams. I live here in Bennington and has nothing to do with the subject, except I have a question. You just talked about Robert's Rule of Order and extensions and so forth. If you have an equal number of yays and equal number of extensions, does the measure carry?
I did a horrible job the last time I chaired one of these meetings, which was 2 months ago, at not answering questions during public comment, which is not supposed to be. So what I would say is, I bet someone will get to that question in due course today. Okay. Thank you for your understanding. Any other public comment? Whether it be about the budget or about the Pledge of Allegiance or anything? Really?
If anybody's online, if they could just raise their hand because I kind of have security locked down.
That's-
I have been during
Yes.
meetings before.
Thank you, Renee. Yeah, so for any folks online who wish to participate in public comments, there's a little wave option, little toggle down at the bottom of your screen. You can certainly use that if you would please.
Hi, Kathy Clark, Shasbury School. I just want to let everybody know that Shasbury School still is not reciting the pledge during the school time. We are outside at 7:55 reciting the pledge to the flagpole outside. It was my understanding that there was a draft policy put in place that it should have been put in place by now. I believe that has been put in place in some schools. It has not in Shasbury's.
Thank you. Any other bits of public comments?
Kelsey Kenyon, also Shaftesbury Elementary School. So in addition to Kathy's comment, it's not being done, but it also has not even been mentioned at all. I know, I think maybe that day, that afternoon, there were other parents that I know in the area that received surveys and all sorts of stuff from other schools. So it is a little disappointing.
Fair?
And Laura, see, that bothers me in hearing that because the directive that was given 2 meetings ago here was going to have all the schools kind of weigh in on the topic. So why Shasberry is choosing, and I will say choosing, what they're doing is wrong. At least participate and come out with whatever response you want, but don't just completely ignore it and then not say it. Shame on them for not participating.
Anyone else? Yes.
And will we be receiving a report tonight on the flag?
So, well, I will say that the first action the board took tonight was to add a discussion and a potential action item about the Pledge of Allegiance. And that's Donna Stone, even though she didn't introduce herself. Who doesn't know Donna Stone? Great. Any other public comments? Well, once, twice, 3 times. Fran, just under the.
I always have to say something. Look, you know, I think that the pledge should be said. If kids don't want to say it, that's fine. Some parents don't want that. But if you've seen what's happened around the country, I mean, we had some clowns on Main Street supporting Hamas that killed people and Palestinians and stuff. And if it's the first, it's a pledge, then it'll be the damn flag. They'll be burning on Main Street or in the school courthouse. Who the hell knows? I mean, it's the culture that's been created. So I just throw that out there. I mean, it didn't ban, you know, the pledge itself. So.
Do we have anything else for public comment? Thanks.
Mike Gardner.
Okay.
And underneath.
Sure. One moment, sir. We got somebody popping on the line and then it'll be next.
Hi, this is Michael Gardner from Shasberry. Hopefully everyone can hear me. You know, my only public comment really is in direct reference to what Ms. Kenyon mentioned. I really hope tonight that we see the results of the schools that chose to follow the, I know it wasn't actually a policy, draft protocol, shall we say. I'd like to see some results of that polling that was done. And very specifically, I'd like the board to address the fact that Shasberry has not done that. That's my public comment. Thank you, Chris.
Ray Supel, Bennington. I just want to know where it's coming from. I don't understand this. We've always done it. But just recently started Shasberry as far as I know. And now we're at Ben Out. I don't get it. I want to know where it's coming from. Is it parents, teachers, principal, whatever? I don't know. I would love to see how it's coming about. I'm a 23-year veteran.
Okay. So that moves us past public comment. We didn't say where we would stick the Pledge of Allegiance talk, but let's stick it right here in terms of the agenda. So the feedback from the building principals that was shared with me by the superintendent was, I think, much what we anticipated. It's not doable. The feedback that we received was more or less unanimous from our building principals that the hope that they can organize a school-wide, what amounts to a school-wide gathering each and every day for the purpose of the pledge is not doable. So what the general request was from our building principals was that if this board wishes the Pledge of Allegiance to be said during the school day, that just like every other thing that the board wishes to be done, we give the directive to our principals and we empower our principals to enact the directive in the way that makes most sense for their schools. So just to compare this to what had been, that there was never any explicit directive from this board until recently, never an explicit directive from this board regarding whether or not the pledge ought to be said. What it was instead left to was empowering building principals to make the decision if they chose to, that how. That was it. So I guess what this board could do, if someone were to make the motion, Candid to say, yes, this board directs the building principals to ensure that the Pledge of Allegiance is said each day in the school buildings. And then we would leave it to that. So that was the feedback that we received from the school, from the principals in response to them attempting or trying to even wrap their heads around how they could facilitate what we had asked them to facilitate 2 months ago at this point.
I would be happy to ask to create that directive if I get this right. Yes, the board directs the elementary schools to participate in the Pledge of Allegiance during the school day inside the building.
So I would ask you to maybe rephrase that, because I think I don't. Our directive should not be participation in the pledge. It should be offering recitation, right? But understanding that, you know, there are a raft of constitutional and other issues that would prevent us from mandating that students participate.
Okay.
So I think we need to steer clear of that verb in whatever motion this board chooses to take up.
So you said it so eloquently the first time, except for.
Did I? Because I felt like I was spitballing.
Yeah.
All right.
So yes, I would like to make the directive that schools offer the Pledge of Allegiance during the school day inside the building.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Okay. So I'm not, this is not a gotcha. Can you repeat that, please, Sandy? Just so.
I'm asking that the board directs the schools to offer the Pledge of Allegiance during the school day inside the building.
Okay. And by schools, do you mean principals or their designees?
Yes, why, of
That's-
course, Chris,
That's
I
a great
mean.
way to phrase it. Okay.
um,
So you are making a motion that this board direct the principals or their designees to,
Make an offering of the pledge. Like those words?
I think it should be stronger. I think we need to let the principals know the board wants the
Yes.
pledge of allegiance to be said.
Yes, that is the correct, will say.
In the
that will be
classroom,
offered in the classroom.
whereas those who wish not to participate are allowed to. do so.
Exactly.
so, and I would say that kind of motion, I think, gets more into the weeds than what our principals have asked for. They've asked for a directive as to whether or not this board wants to direct them to say it. And if we do, to trust that the principals are going to do it in a way that makes most sense for their schools. And maybe it will make complete sense in every single one of our schools for it to happen inside the classroom. But if for whatever reason, that's not what is going to work best for a particular school, I don't want to micromanage our principals in that way. Is my response to that addition in the classrooms.
Doesn't sit well with me that we're changing the way that everything has always been done, thus why I offer the classroom antidote.
I don't really want, I have respect for all the principals.
Mhm.
But at the moment, I'm a little upset with the Shasberry principal, and I want to make sure that he understands that this board wants the Pledge of Allegiance to be said inside, not outdoors, not in the gym. All these years I've been on the board for 23 years, and they've never had a problem saying the pledge in the classroom.
Do we know that to be a fact, Cindy? Because I don't know that to be a fact.
Yeah.
And it's been said in the classroom.
Yes, it has.
So,
There's never been a change.
so, and
23
I'm not fighting it, and please don't hear this as a position that we ought not to be saying the pledge. That's not what this is. What I'm trying to say is this. It has been done differently in all of the elementary schools of the SVUESD when it's been done at all. And it's been, as we discovered in Shasberry, it's been 3 years since it's been said as a school-wide sort of event. I believe maybe it was over the announcements, and I may have that wrong, right? So there are different things happening in each of our schools. And I don't know that we can say that, I know that I cannot say with any certainty that it has definitely happened in a very specific way in all of our schools since forever, because I don't know that to be the case.
Okay, so let me back up a minute. We are now one.
For sure.
So under the one umbrella,
Mhm.
this is the way it should be continued.
So I'm still, what I would like to do is hear a motion and then have a second, and then we can move forward on this action. Because I do think this is important to establish and then be able to move past, so we can deal with things like the budget. Yes or no?
Both Ricardo and Jeff have their hands up.
Okay.
I've asked them both to,
Yeah,
Um,
you know, it's hard because we're locked out, and their video's locked out, so it's hard to kind of open the video right now, Renee.
Sure,
So I don't
sure.
know if you can
no,
open it.
I have the video shut off. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Jeff, just
so-
because of what's happened in the past.
Yeah. Understand. So we'll just kind of use this as we can. We're getting off the topic here. We should make a motion, you know, second the motion, discuss it, and if we need to drop that motion, we should come back and revisit, you know, that discussion piece. It's not discussed now. Let's make a motion and then discuss it.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that is the way it should go. You're
Yep.
right, Jeff.
Can-
Ricardo?
Yeah, so I'm happy to go in whatever way Chris and the rest of the crew think makes sense. Just to clarify, and I think what you were saying was speaking to that, but I think some of the language that was used at the beginning of this, 2 months ago when we had this meeting is instructional time. Are you leaving that open? Or does that need to happen in discussion, or does that need to happen while Sandy's making the motion?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's an important point for us to consider before a motion is made, in that one part of the directives that came out of this, I think 2 months ago, 3 months ago, part of what we had talked about as a board was the concern of having a school-wide practice occur during instructional time. So I would just ask that however a motion is made, that it address that piece of it as well, whether or not the intent is to have the pledge said specifically during instructional time or not. So whoever chooses to put forth a motion.
So if I went back to the beginning and say that the motion is to offer the pledge within the school day inside of the school, does that fulfill what you're asking?
I do not know if inside the school building is necessary, because again, what our principals are, the feedback we asked for, the feedback that we got was to give a directive and let them figure out how to meet that directive.
And I have a concern with the majority of days that are cold or chilly,
Mhm.
that we put our children outside. It's just my personal
Mhm.
piece. And since I am an elected person, I feel that strongly that I want to be within the building.
Yes, I agree. No outside.
Never outside.
No.
Okay, like that, because this has attracted so much attention, because people have such strong feelings about it, I think we need to be crystal clear in what we give to our principals.
Well, we live in Vermont,
Guess what we do?
and sometimes the temperature goes below zero.
Yep. And sometimes it's
I
over
wouldn't
80.
want My
is what I-
children and grandchildren to be outside.
Sure.
You know,
And I guess my only response to that, Cindy, is that we trust our building principals every other day to make decisions about whether or not the kids go outside or stay inside based on the weather.
Absolutely. And this has been such an event that seems that we should understand what our position is and how we feel we should direct it to our principals, so that they certainly understand what we feel is
So-
important.
Let me throw this out there, and if anyone wants to make this a motion, then so be it. The SVUESD Board of Directors directs that the Pledge of Allegiance is to be recited on each school day. Is that sufficient?
No.
Okay,
no.
okay. Let's somebody say more.
Inside the building, not during instructional time, i.e. the usual morning meeting practice that takes place.
But that's instructional, isn't it? I would consider that instructional.
No, they,
No, you
no.
don't consider that instructional?
I know most school, like, Benel per se starts at 8:25, they start their Benel live at 8:20.
Okay.
So it doesn't cut into instruction.
So based on what Glenn said, this is not a motion at this point, if someone wants to make it. The SVUESD Board of Directors directs that the Pledge of Allegiance is to be recited each school day inside the building. I can't read my writing, before instructional time or outside of instructional
I
time.
think that keeps it in the morning, which has been precedent, tradition. what
Okay,
have
let
you.
me read that again. The SVUESD Board of Directors directs that the Pledge of Allegiance is to be recited on each school day inside the building before instructional time starts.
Does that encompass like we kind of went back and forth with when school starts and doing it like in that few minutes before school starts. So if we're saying outside of instructional time, is that still in the actual like school day when students are required to be there?
So if I'm getting the nod from the teachers that are in this room, when they're talking about their circle time, that is not considered instructional time.
So this is clear enough that this is like after the expected start of the school day, but during like morning meeting sort of time. I just want to make sure that we're clear that they're not still directing to do it before the start of school time. If that's what we're trying to
Right.
stay away from.
And that is exactly, you're exactly right. That is what we're trying to stay away from.
So I just wanted to make sure that that was a clear, like,
Yeah.
within
Yeah.
the school day, but
Mhm.
outside of instructional time sort of wording, you know?
So Director Gordon, are you able to speak to whether or not the definition of instructional time is consistent across each of our elementary schools?
Can't even tell you that the start time is
Well,
the same.
I know the start time,
schools.
is right? I know that, right,
It's all different now.
The amount of minutes. Yes.
yeah, okay.
But in the schedules.
Well, I think what I just stated is probably the closest we're going to come to a consensus. I don't know that it avoids all of the issues that had been identified in earlier meetings, but I don't know that we're gonna have a solution that does necessarily address each of the concerns that have been raised in earlier meetings.
True. And piggyback onto that, it seems like if it absolutely didn't work out, we certainly could come back
You can always do that.
if we felt necessary.
So I'm gonna make this final statement around this. I would like us to either take action on this right now or table this to the next meeting, because we have to get through our budget stuff tonight. We
I'm
have
gonna
to.
take action.
I'll take that. So somebody needs to make a motion and then we can take it from there.
I just have a question before we take a motion.
Right on, Cindy.
Okay, I like the way it was written up. I just want to be sure that this applies to all principals.
It would, yep.
Okay,
Motion?
I'll second.
Okay, first and second. So again, the motion is, tell me if this is right, Cindy, Sandy, before Cindy seconds it. Sandy first, Cindy second. The SVUESD Board of Directors directs that the Pledge of Allegiance is to be recited on each school day inside the building before instructional time starts. Is that what your motion is? Is that what your
That is my
second
motion.
is?
Yes.
Any further discussion on that? Any of our online board members?
You know, just, I think the only thing we should put in there is that, you know, we have to make it clear that if a student decides not to do this, whether it be directed by their parents or the student initiative, that, you know, the teacher doesn't point it out. You know, if they decide to sit, they should be allowed to sit. And if there's a problem, I'd like, you know, the report back to the board if there is a situation like that.
Yeah, well, and although the board does not, nor should it, get involved in disciplinary matters of building staff, I would certainly hope that would be the case, that if for any reason a teacher is singling out a student for a thing like that.
Because that's where the lawsuits occur, is in
Yeah,
that.
And you know,
So,
Jeff, that what you're saying reminds me that another piece of feedback we got from the principals was that in any event where there is student on student bullying for any reason,
Mhm.
that is dealt with. Like that is dealt with. So concerning that, I think I know I for one had, if I didn't put voice to it, was like, are we creating a system? Are we creating a practice that is going to single out kids? And is that going to cause those kids a hard time?
Yeah.
But if we can trust, and I believe we can, our building principals to address instances of bullying, then we'll deal with that. So any further discussion on this motion?
Just one more thing,
Budget.
talking about the school day, you know, we might have to revisit that if we found out something different on instructional time. So,
Yep,
you know,
for
we have
sure.
to push it to within 1 minute of the start of the school day at Shasbury. It's 8:30, so, you know, the pledge can be said within 2 minutes of the 8:30 time.
Right.
So we'll revisit
I agree with
as
that, Jeff.
needed.
Yeah. So any other further discussion on this?
I mean, I'll just add that the before instructional time doesn't seem clear. I think the way it was discussed in the room doesn't seem consistent with how it was discussed, 2 months ago, I'll say. But yeah, so I'm still a bit unclear on that.
Yeah, no, and I agree, Ricardo, that it does not, this is different than what was envisioned 2 months ago. It is. I think it's one of those situations where I'm unable to envision a solution that addresses all of the concerns that this board has raised and members of the public have raised, frankly. So motion is made and seconded. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Any abstentions, which is the same as a no vote?
I abstained because I don't have information.
I opposed.
Okay,
That's
So-
referred to.
so 5 for, 1 in opposition, 1 abstain, 1 abstention, so the motion passes. Okay, that brings us to our next agenda item, which is the budget. So Director Gordon. It's all yours.
Good evening.
And I really wish people would stick around because school budgets are essential. They are absolutely essential. In order for us to be able to run our schools and provide good facilities and have quality instructors and provide extracurriculars, it is essential for school funding. So I really wish folks would stick around. And if you're not going to, I suppose that's fine. I hope you have a nice night and a happy holiday. And I may not answer it, you can answer.
I just want to make sure we're following what we're supposed to, like, Mrs. Kenyon and I, it's very good. We were told not to do anymore. We stopped doing it. We just want to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Sure.
Can we start saying the pledge tomorrow morning in our classroom with our students who choose to do it? Right after the morning show, like we have been.
So what the board, and I'm gonna just say to the board, hey, board, I'm not gonna answer your question, but I'll talk to the board. What we just did was to direct principals to figure out how it's gonna be done in their schools. And this board should not be telling teachers how they can conduct things tomorrow. Right? Tonight, the action tonight will be communicated to the building principals. They will put it into effect.
Yeah.
And that's gotta
So I
be.
still have to wait for.
But they
administrative to tell them.
Yeah.
So we-
Oh, I didn't just answer that question. I thought
Yeah.
I heard Stephanie ask it.
We're doing what we're
Yeah,
supposed to do.
for sure.
Can I?
We have to go to the budget. We have to go to the budget. So please, Renee, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Oh, Good evening, everybody, and just for folks here in the room,
Folks, if we can
Just
just
so
put
you
the
know,
volume down, please, in the room. Thank you.
there are mics in the ceiling, so they're gonna pick up every conversation. Um, So what I have is basically what was put in the packet for last meeting. I didn't run a new set to just save a little bit of paper for the board. So what was posted last week's agenda is posted again with tonight's agenda. So as is typical, I have taken over 2,500 lines of budget and crammed it into 13. And with the first 2 being the biggest ones that we have. So it's basically our staff, right? Salaries and benefits. So the staff that's currently employed are currently in the budget that you have before you. We do know that the collective bargaining agreement that was agreed upon for this current year extends into next year as well. So we know what those salary increases are going to be, 9%. So those have been factored in. Along with that, there is a factor that's built in for a handful of folks that aren't part of a collective bargaining unit, non-union positions, if the board so chooses to give them an increase next year. Along with that, there was one position requested, Superintendent Colkeen asked that an HHB CSTAB coordinator is a hazing, harassment, bullying, and comprehensive school threat assessment guidelines coordinator. So this was a relatively new position that was added at the Anthony Union Middle School and has been incredibly successful. There's a lot of work that goes into the investigation. So to have a coordinator that handles that, we felt strongly that it should be there. So that is included salary and benefits, estimated at about 112. Also, a highlight for you here is those of you may be aware that there was a 21st century grant that was applied for and granted to the SVUESD for year 1 right now. It's a 5-year grant. And as the years go on, we need to build internal infrastructure to basically support or sustain those programming activities. So what happened this past summer, all the summer programming was supported with the last round of ESSER funds. Those funds have since gone away. programming that's happening now in after-school settings through the rest of the year is being supported through the 21st Century Grant and the little bits of money that were in local budgets at the SVUESD, Mount Anthony, and Arlington. So all school districts acting together on this. So in order for summer programming to happen next year, I had to build it into the local budget. So that's about $125,000 worth of stipends that have been added in here. And we basically just modeled that after what we had this past summer. So just so you're aware that that's what's kind of driving up that, the salary line there on top of the 9% increases for our collective bargaining unit folks and the added position there. And then, oh, sorry for those folks that are at home because I have a tendency to do this. I don't always scroll when I'm supposed to. So now you can see all the highlights of the salary portion. So on the benefit side, health insurance is always the big one. So the VHI board, the Vermont Education Health Initiative, who manages our health insurance plans, has submitted to the Department of Federal Regulation their proposed premium increases for next year. And the two plans that are collectively bargained at the state level are the CDHP Gold and Silver plans. So both of those have a projected increase of 11.9% for next year. So I have factored that into the budget that you have before you tonight. Along with that, the support staff, as part of that statewide negotiation, have had a 1% decrease in their, actually a 1% increase in their share, but the employer side has been a decrease every year. January 1 of 2026 will be the point at which support staff and the professional staff, teaching staff, are at the same level. So they're in an 80-20 split. Employer provides 80% of the premium, the employees provide 20% of any plan. So that's factored in. And one thing, those of you that sit on the SVSU board have heard me say this in terms of the HRA. So HRA's health reimbursement arrangements are associated with the health insurance plans. The employer is required to pay first. So on a single plan, it's $1,900 for professional staff, $2,200 for support staff, and $4,000 and $4,400 for anything beyond, for professional and then support staff. We have found that even though this money is available, on average, our staff are using about 62% of that health reimbursement arrangement. So once we went to these plans a few years ago, I was initially budgeting 100% because we had no experience to know what the usage was going to be. We have a few years of data, more comfortable seeing it at 62%. I'm proposing, and what I included in this budget is that we fund those at 55%, which doesn't mean that there's going to be any jeopardy to anything that anybody is eligible for. It's just the amount of money that I'm putting into a bank account to sustain replenishments supporting those. So because I had been budgeting 100% for a couple of years, and then 95, and then 85 this year, 75, there's enough money in there to sustain going forward. And then we can reevaluate next year at this time if we want to tick that back up. So that's been in. And then the not teacher retirement, the municipal retirement is ticking up by another 0.25% next year. So that has been factored in for those staff that are part of municipal retirement. And then there's also a projected increase to an assessment that we pay to Vermont teacher retirement every year. So any teacher that is new to the retirement system after July 1 of 2015, the employer has to pay a flat fee every year, and it typically goes up by about $100. Actually just got the bill. It's over $100,000 for the SVUESD. So it's a way to sustain the teacher retirement system, but it's a pretty consistent fee that we see year after year. So for those teachers that we have coming in that I know that are already subject to this assessment, we've got it in there. And if
I think there's only one vacancy right now, so I've gone ahead and factored that in as a potential cost for next year as well. Dental rates are flat for next year, thankfully. And then the budget before you basically is anything that's currently elected right now is what I plan for next year. So if somebody gets married and has a baby, we could end up short, but so be it. You know, that's the way that it typically rolls. So, but again, those are your two biggest items, salaries and benefits, 10.6% and 13.5%. With those highlights there. So any questions before I on, and let me just check. Zoom, see if there's any hands up, and nope. Okay. The next couple of lines we have are contracted services and operations. So the contracted services include tutoring. Anytime we have students that might be in a hospital setting receiving tutoring or accessing the tutorial center, it would come out of this line. We also do have mental health services and then some facility services as well too. So the contractors that we have coming in to do inspections on our fire extinguishers and our hoods and kitchens and things of that nature are factored in here. We do have a truancy contract with the Bennington County Sheriff's Department. So I have plugged a little bit of money in for each school for that because I believe our contract right now is either a 3 or 4 hour minimum per call. So it ends up being a few $100 every time we have to make that call. And then I went through and made some adjustments just kind of based on what has been the spending patterns over the last couple of years. And that's why it's, and ultimately it's resulting in a decrease over what has been budgeted for the current year. And same thing with operations. You know, we do have a couple of things that we know we're planning for increases, but I've also gone through and really kind of line by line looked at some items and said, you know what, this has been consistently over budgeted. I'm going to scale it back. And again, I think we're probably in fine shape with what's there now. So those are the changes that have been made. And just on the operations line for those, it kind of encompasses pretty much everything that's not a person, a contracted service, or a supply. It's kind of like the catch-all. So it's, you know, our phone service. It's when we have any staff that's traveling between buildings, we pay them mileage to do so. It's, you know, our insurance premiums for our liability and our vehicles, things along those lines. The next two lines, just because of the way that it lines up here on the screen, is transportation and tuition. So what you're seeing in that transportation line does not include the cost of transportation to and from school. That's going to be included a little bit further down in the assessments because that's carried at the SU level. This transportation line essentially is covering all of our field trip transportation and then transportation for 21C 21st Century Grant programming. We had been running after school buses, late buses. That was a local expense too, not carried at the SU level. So again, looking at what we had been spending and then of course what we need to continue to support the 21st century programming for next summer and after school is the budget that you have before you. And then the tuition line is for an out-of-district placement that is anticipated for that to be continuing next year, not related to student services. So that's why it's carried in the local budget. The supply line is next and kind of grouped with equipment. We have been over the last couple of years kind of making the migration out of the equipment lines, moving them to supply lines because of our capitalization threshold. And what that means is when we buy something, a single item that has a value of $5,000 or more, we then capitalize it as a fixed asset and we can depreciate it. These tables while you think of them as being equipment, they're not, it's a supply. So that's why the budgets need to be in that supply line. And along with that are licenses for online learning tools that teachers use, along with paper towels that are in the restrooms. So those are your supplies there. In the equipment line, there's only a small budget left for operations and grounds equipment. As you can see, I've wiped that out considerably and migrated most of it up to the supply line. In the dues and fees, again, just some adjustments based on prior years. The assessments are based on the current draft of the SVSU budget. And I can tell you that I got a revised version of long-term weighted average daily membership in my email at about 9:30 last night, which changed all the assessments from, so what you have in your packet is going to differ from what I show you a little bit later in terms of the assessments, because everybody's numbers went down, but SVUESD's went down less than other member districts. So therefore your portion of the assessments went up a little bit to the tune of about $37,000. So when we get into the tax calculation, the numbers will just look a little bit different than what's on here, but I'll make sure that what I hand out shortly will be posted with tonight's packet. And then just a couple of things to note about the assessments. This district is carrying about 90% of pre-K costs that you share with the North Bennington graded school district. There's over 300 kids that are typically served in a year in the pre-K program. And then special education is directly assessed based on staff and student need. And we know that at the SU level, there was a request to add 3 new para positions, particularly registered behavior technicians for next year to support incoming students with autism spectrum disorder. So that is being directly assessed. So that is contributing to the increase that you're seeing in the assessments, along with the fact that many of the fund balances have been spent down gradually over the years. So the numbers that we're seeing are tending to be truer on like executive administration, the business office, human resources, technology, things along those lines. And our debt service, slight decrease in the interest, and that's just based on our payment schedule. Contingency I've left as is at $210,000, and did not make any changes to the potential transfer into the capital projects account. But those 2 items could certainly be something to look at if the board was looking at areas to easily make reductions from, because I did include in the packet what the current reserve fund balances are. And those of you that are relatively new to the board, prior to the SVUESD being a union district, was 4 separate elementary districts, and each of those districts had their own reserve fund. So when we became a union, those accounts, basically those funds stayed intact, and they are being used specifically for those buildings that they were basically accumulated for. The SVUESD that has $520,000 in it now can be used at the board's discretion on any of the schools. So that one's been basically built collectively as the union district, whereas all the others are certainly building specific, and or for the Bennington ones would be split between the 3 Bennington elementary schools. So with that, I will stop sharing for just a moment and let everybody kind of take a breath, see if anybody has any hands up on. Questions before I continue to plow through. Sorry, I know it's a lot of information. So in your packet, so that's pages 1, 2, and 3, pretty much what I just presented. Page 4 is it's up here for folks at home. Page 4 is the same budget, just broken out into a different format. So instead of breaking it out by category, I've broken it out by function. So it's essentially compressing all of those budget categories into each of those functions. And then getting on page 10 of your packet is a combination. So it's the function with all of the categories. So it's giving you a little bit more detail. So for those of you who want to take a deeper dive, but again, I do it this way just so in hopes that it's a little bit more digestible. Because again, if I gave you the line by line, you would have probably close to 100 pages of budget. Then, so that being said, page 8 in the packet is just a list of acronyms. We know we live kind of in alphabet soup in education, so I try to include that in the first draft. And then page 9, I wanted to make out, just need to pull up here. It's something new that I'm trying to include in every school district's packet is an FTE count. So this is what your current staffing is with notations if there was a position requested. So for SVUESD, okay, this is page 9 in your packet. This is what it looks like. So basically, I have each column is a school with the final column all the way over on the right side. Being district-wide positions. And so this is just giving you the FTEs. And then at the top, the student count as of December 4th, I believe is when I got it from tech. So those are our student counts as of that point in time. And then the low percentage incomes I have pulled out of our grants management system. And that gets loaded by the Agency of Education based on our student data. So just to give you some reference points there. Hope this is somewhat helpful, just so you can see the head count of folks we have in the buildings. Now, mind you, again, this is just locally funded positions. At the very bottom, I do have a note about quote unquote local paras. We did move all of our paraprofessionals to the SVSU employment several years ago, but we track them by building. So essentially you are paying for the 30 paraprofessionals that are divided up between the 6 buildings.
So in that case, those positions are not part of this.
They are,
They are.
because you're paying for it through your assessment.
Okay.
Yes. And essentially all of your special education staff in your buildings too are in your special education assessment. So your budget is your budget, but in terms of FTEs directly funded, like these are the folks that you employ in the top portion of that. You do not employ your local paras or any of your special education staff. The SVSU does.
But they're, so
But their
that's my
cost, their
question.
cost is in here.
So it's, I'm not gonna hear about it later on in the SU budget being part of that budget as well, because it's been designated to this budget.
Oh,
Is that correct?
it's in the SU budget because they're employees of the SU.
Okay, but I'm also saying it here.
Because the SVUESD has to pay for them.
Am I saying it twice is my question?
Essentially, yes, but what you're seeing in the SVUESD is the net offsetting revenue. So we have fund balances come off.
Now, of the people, the local paras in particular is what I'm curious about. So if they're listed here, they're part of the elementary school.
Oh,
budget.
in terms of the FTE count that I included in the SU. There may have been a separate line for local pairs, which would have been 32, because there's 2 in the Mount Anthony district.
I just wanted to make sure they weren't in both budgets. That's my question.
We're not getting mine twice. Laura.
Right.
We're-
I
we're
was
not.
gonna say all that,
You're
you're in the SU budget, but the SVUESD is paying for them essentially.
So the chair wants to recognize the SU chair, Scott, who had your hand raised. So please.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask for clarification on the same thing that Sandy started to go down the path of, and that is, just to be clear, it's showing up in our SU budget. However, by district, in this case, the ESD, it gets pulled out of it. You're seeing it in your budget also because it has to be accounted for there, but you're paying the SU. It's the assessment back to the
I
SU
just wanted
budget.
to make sure we weren't
Sure.
double.
You're not paying it twice.
Yeah, or that it wasn't showing up twice.
Well, it is. Right?
Essentially, it is, but just.
It has to
two
be
different
accounted
ways,
for.
Because you're seeing it in your budget as an assessment. The SU is seeing it as salaries and as employees.
But it says locally funded.
Mhm.
I'm a little simple on this, and that's why I'm reading it as this is part of this budget, is because it says it's locally
Yeah,
funded.
so the pairs at the bottom, they could not be taken and put at Mount Anthony or put in Arlington because the SVUESD is paying for them.
Sorry, maybe if I think of it this way, the SU is paying for the body. We are then invoicing back the ESD for that body because it's being applied here to the ESD buildings.
As long as I'm not saying it twice, that's my
We're
clarification.
seeing it noted twice, we're being charged once.
And the reason that happens is because the SVSU is not a taxing entity that has no source of income other than the assessments that are coming in from the local district and funds that come in from the agency. Our census block grant.
Note of the time, 5:52.
Yes, okay, quickly, I will jump into. A quick look at the revenue. Tax calculation. So the first pass of looking at students that are tuitioning into the district, it looks like we will have one more next year. Beginning of next month, we will be working on, oops, my screen did not share. We'll be working on announced tuition. That's due to the agency on January 15th. So this number, the first line here, the regular elementary tuition could tick up just a little bit. Most of this is students that are coming in from North Bennington graded school district. So they're paying to attend either Shaftesbury, Benel, Molly Stark. Investment earnings, we've just kind of flatlined that. Interest rates are coming down, although we did see some good benefit from that in previous years. Our fund balance is down over $900,000 going into next year. So that is a significant shift. However, that's what we should be doing. And as we anticipated with ESSER funds going away, we're going to see those excess funds start to be spent down and depleted. And then we just have a couple other small sources of revenue that come in. We will qualify for the English language learning categorical grant that was new this past year from the agency. Based on our account, we will get another $50,000 next year. Forest revenue, based on what we have been receiving in previous years, I upticked that to 19,000. Impact aid, I've also ticked that up a little bit based on previous years. And we do have proceeds from a bond in Pownell from years ago. taking back a couple $100 into the district.
Nice work, Cindy.
So we basically take everything that's in white there and offset it to the general state support grant. So this is what is known as our education spending or our demand on the education fund. So you can see that that is in this current draft, an increase of 16.51%. This is different than what you have in your packet because this has been updated with the assessment. And then the final page, which again has been updated from your packet. I updated this morning with our long-term weighted average daily membership. All of our numbers for those of you on other boards have gone down in all of our districts. So that has pushed our cost and estimated tax rates up. But again, here we have to break out because of the union districts that we are part of in Bennington, Shaftesbury, Pownell, Woodford, and North Bennington. We have to basically combine the districts together proportionately based on what their budgets are. So I know this is very complicated math. Some people get intimidated by lots of numbers, but basically we're taking your budget as you have before you, and again, this is up about $37,000 from the draft you have. Taking our offsetting revenue, getting to our education spending. So you see on the previous page, our education spending was 29 million. Here, 29 million, same number. Our long-term weighted average daily membership is the sum of our 4 towns up here. So Bennington, Shaftesbury, Woodford, total 2312.94. That's our number here. And then we divide those pupils into our education spending to get $12,641 as our education spending per long-term weighted EVM. If we were spending more than 15,962, we would be in the excess spending threshold and be penalized for that. So we're not anywhere near the excess spending threshold. And so the same calculations hold true for MAU. I just have them in blue to keep them somewhat separated out for understanding. The homestead property yield recommendation that came out in the December 1st letter was 85.53, which is down from last year. However, that is because it has been adjusted by a new factor called the statewide adjustment, which they're estimating to be 72%. So if that didn't exist, the property yield's actually over 11,800. So it's up quite a bit. And that's just the forecast from the Joint Fiscal Office and the Tax Commissioner and what they think that the education fund is going to be able to sustain. I also want to point out that that is based on average anticipated education spending increase of 6.1% statewide. Current budget for us is 16.51%. So we're significantly higher at this draft than what is anticipated statewide. What does that mean? If everybody comes in over, that means the education fund's not going to have enough money. So they're going to have to drive that yield down to generate more money in property taxes, which is going to drive our tax rates up. But as it stands right now, so with that property yield, we basically take Mount Anthony's, we take SVUESDs and proportionately blend them by town. Sorry, I guess I shrink this a little bit and be able to see it. This is Bennington, so they go alphabetically across the screen. Bennington. Okay, with the budget before you and the current draft of Mount Anthony's right now, Bennington would be looking at just under a penny increase on their tax rate. Pownell about 5.75 cents, Shaftesbury about 4 3/4, and Woodford about 9.5. The bottom portion of that is just kind of what the estimated increases would be on homes at various assessed values for each town. So I'll make sure that this is up. I do have hard copies here for anybody who's interested in seeing it really quickly. If there's any guidance that the board wants to offer in terms of what you would like to see. Because I know it's a big increase, but we know we've got big increases with health insurance and our collective bargaining agreement salaries are a big increase next year. So there's really only other places we can look unless we're looking at the FTE counts that we have. So
Director Gordon, is there any pending action by the SU that might hugely impact these numbers? The numbers that you posted up there?
I worked through that budget. We're gonna be looking at it again here shortly. We've already carved out about $600,000 from draft 1 to draft 2, so I'm not anticipating any other changes. The only new things that were being introduced were the 3 paras for supporting the elementary schools in this district. And then the 1 early education, which is essentially being paid 90% by this board. I'm ready.
So thank you, first of all, because I know all the work that you put into this and how difficult it is. And I remember last year, as you also shared so eloquently, our expenditures, our revenues, that it was an increase, and it would be because we were going away from, I think, as funds at that time, or that we knew we would be. And so I pulled out my last year's final, and it is a 10.5% increase. So it's a 10.5% increase. And then I look at this without even getting into the details, and it's 10 7/10 of an increase. And that's a huge back-to-back, year-to-year increase. And I certainly respect and understand that we do have the salaries that we want to make sure that we're taking care of our staff, our teachers. But I think we do need to look at it, and when I say we, you know, I don't mean me. So I apologize right there for sharing that. But I think that we should look at it and take a hard look and say, what is it that can be shaved a little bit to get this down a bit. And then the other piece of this is that you had made a statement that 90% of the early ed program rests on the ESD. And so I'd like to know what is that, what are our counts in triple E? What are our counts in the children who are in the pre-K programs? And what is it that we are spending our 10 hours a week for 35 weeks out of the school year? What part of the budget is in that? And what part of it is something that I don't even know what to ask you a question about, because I'm just unaware of that level.
So Sandy, because I want to note the time, and there's an SU meeting that was supposed to start 3 minutes ago. So let me ask this,
My apologies.
Director Gordon, can you please remind us of what are our timelines at this point? And what needs to be dealt with by this board tonight, and what could be taken up at our January meeting?
I was expecting that we would probably look at this again at your regular meeting. However, you won't meet until 14th, right? Because you're the second Tuesday. We could potentially look to meet on the 7th of January to maybe take a deeper dive. But in terms of warning the meeting, annual meeting, warning the budget, and getting it to the district clerk for posting, it has to be posted between January 23rd and February 2nd. So we can warn it ahead of that. But February 2nd is a Sunday. So backing into that, it's really January. We've got to have this locked down.
I would like to see this board meet again, and if January 7th is a date that works for the rest of the calendar, I would like us to get back then. I would ask that folks take a look at this. I agree. It seems steep, but we also knew that we were gonna be facing something very close to this. We knew that. But let's come with deeper questions. Some recommendations would be welcome as well. And this is a lot to chew on. We ought not to jump to anything right now anyhow.
Can I also ask for the enrollment, K to 12 or K to 6 enrollment?
Yeah.
It's on,
1100.
yeah, it's 1103, which is on the top of your.
It's broken on there.
By grade?
No.
Oh, no, just by school.
So this is what I would ask the board members. Take the week, come up with questions, forward those questions to me, and I will provide one master list of questions to the superintendent, please.
I'm for the 7th.
Let's say 5:30, give her to that, that's subject to change. We need to confirm with the rest of the calendar.
I don't have anything.
Take a look. Is that what you just did? Okay.
I was giving you, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Director Gordon. This is massive. It's a huge undertaking every single year. Thank you for that. So we've exhausted our agenda. There is an FYI, which I would direct your attention to.
Quick question, Chris, Jeff.
Yeah,
Did
Jeff,
we have a consent agenda we had to sign?
we did not.
We missed our meeting last month.
Yeah, we'll take all that up at our next regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay, just because it's the end of the year, so we're not gonna have, if
Not this
Renee
one.
needs to know it's paid.
Oh, and those have been taken care of. Yeah. Because,
Okay.
yeah, because the board has authorized the chair and vice and assistant chair, vice chair, Sandy, to sign off when we don't meet.
Perfect.
Okay, so thank you, SU, for your patience, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
First, second, any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very good. Thank you to the 3 people who stuck around.
Okay, you sign this. please?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so Renee, I didn't sign out, then jump back on the other link.
Yeah, because it's another meeting link. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, yeah.